Well, hi, Prescott, and thank you for tuning in to another Prescott E-News Prescott Talk Show. My name is Glenn Martin, and I'm the host. And today we're going to be talking about Proposition 207 and the implications of it and what's going on in our, what impacts, I should say, would it have in our communities. I want to give a bias alert right from the beginning. I am not in favor of 207. So if you're watching this and saying, "Well, gosh, he sounds like he's favoritism," or not, it does. I am. I'm not in favor of recreational marijuana. But today, speaking on the issue, I have Sally Schindel, and she's no stranger to the show. Thank you for coming in, Sally.
Sure, happy to be back.
I was telling Rob, I remember one show that we did. We were wearing headgear and speaking into microphones, if you remember. So, isn't technology great? We're actually getting better.
Yeah.
So, a little bit about yourself, and let's get into 207.
Okay, a little bit about myself. I'd like the whole audience to know that Glenn and I know each other as friends and how we met. Because Glenn and I belong to what I call the club no one wants to join. We met over the fact that both of us lost sons at early ages. And actually, I realized while I was driving over here this morning that Glenn and I belong to more than one club no one wants to join. There's that one, Child Loss Club, but there's also the one of we're afraid of today's marijuana. We're afraid of what the high potency and the normalization and the commercialization, the celebration of marijuana is going to do to other kids. And Glenn and I both dare to speak out and say that. And that's not popular in a lot of circles. I just this week I've been called a liar again. She lies. She says her son died because of his marijuana use. So I'm happy to be with my friend Glenn, and his wife is his wife is one of my favorite people, and we're very serious about our let's recognize marijuana as the harmful drug that it is.
I think sometimes when we advocate for something that a lot of people use, they become very emotionally attached, and I've been called a liar, and much worse, quite honestly, not on just marijuana, but on a lot of other issues. I'm kind of a political guy, and that's fine, I try to come back with the facts and try to get people to understand my point of view. I'm not going to, I hate nobody, and I'm not going to call anybody a liar. I usually say you're not being truthful, but, those are pretty strong words. But, you're right, I lost my son, and one of the reasons, Sally, that recreational marijuana is really a big deal for me is I was on the Sober Home Committee. I was actually the chair for Harry Oberg. And not only during the time that my son was in recovery, but on the chair, I saw many incidences of people whose lives were being destroyed due to drug use, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them, their gateway drug was alcohol and marijuana. So, I see no good things that happen from legalizing another substance. And people say, well, alcohol's legal, why not marijuana? Well, why so marijuana? Alcohol's brought us so much good things in life. Now, I'm not talking about the guy who has a glass of wine with dinner, but, alcohol is an issue as well. There's a lot of substance abuse, and I don't know why we want to open up Pandora's box for another.
I agree with that. And I wore my little pin today, Matt Force ambassador. And Matt Force is Yavapai County working to reduce substance abuse. And it's not just marijuana, it includes alcohol. And there's great work done by Matt Force. So one of the things, I just bring this out right away and show that. One of the things Matt Force does is run a poster contest for kids, and they make these wonderful posters every year. I've been able to be a judge, and what a fun thing that is to do. I did that with your wife one day.
I believe so.
But I thought this one was so great. This was done by a 12-year-old 7th grader at Glassford Hill Middle School. It was Edgar Carino. And I think it's perfect. I use it. I've shared it on my Facebook, and it's just, don't let drugs change don't let drugs change our state. Marijuana for adults, for some adults, apparently causes them no problems whatsoever. They use it very successfully and happily, and they don't have the bad effects. But in a child's brain, it is extremely, extremely dangerous. So it was my son's death that propelled me into this. I'm a child of the 60s myself. I'm no stranger to marijuana, to the marijuana of the past. This is the marijuana that I knew, this little joint that got passed around a party, and maybe 20 people shared it, and then they got the giggles and they got the munchies, and that's what I thought marijuana was. Mm-hmm. And when my son in his 20s, his later 20s, started telling me, we had noticed he'd been in psychiatric hospitals, he'd had some severe mental health issues, and he was an adult, so he didn't share with me his medical experiences. I didn't know it was marijuana at the time that could have been causing the mental illnesses themselves. But toward the end of his life, he did share that it's marijuana. He said, I have to quit using marijuana if I'm to live. He'd told us he'd made numerous suicide attempts. Mm-hmm. But he always said, but don't worry about me. He says, I'm a chicken. I'll never do it. Don't worry. But I have to quit using marijuana if I'm going to live. I didn't understand that at all because I had no clue that this is the kind of stuff they're using today. And what's so dangerous to the kids is the edibles and the vaping, because they're odorless. Mm-hmm. So they can be used all day long. And actually, it was several years after my son's death. He's been gone 6.5 years now. Several years after, his best friend shared with me that in high school, they smoked marijuana every day, every single day. Mm-hmm. And this is in my household where my husband at the time, his stepfather, was in long-term recovery for alcohol abuse. We had no drugs, we had no alcohol in our house, we were a drug-free home. He knew all about, my son grew up knowing all about the recovery process, the addiction possibility, and the combination of me being unaware of how available it was to him and how dangerous it was to him at his age. The combination of that and the combination of him being a teenager, and a teenage brain says, ooh-wee, I want to take all the risks I can find. Sure. I can't, just the rewards are way more important than the risk, and I don't care about the risk, and I don't believe the risk, and that's the nature of the teenage brain. And that's what's so dangerous.
And that's why we start the kids young to understand the dangers, and Matt Force is a leader in that, where they go to the schools and they talk to the kids. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was in junior high school, we'd have the people come up and they would talk about different drugs, and we just kind of slough it off. But that wasn't when people were dying as fast as they are today. That was the pre-fentanyl and the pre like you said, the marijuana of the 60s absolutely is not the marijuana of today. It's been hybrid and it's been cultivated to have like 100% THC in it, and it causes a lot of problems. Like you said, Sally, and I couldn't agree with you more, there are people who can even use the high potency marijuana one day and forget about it, and it was, yeah, that was fun. I had a bowl of, ice cream, and life was good. But then there's other people who smoke it, and they can't wait to smoke it again. It becomes, it's a very powerful drug. Whether it's physically addicting, mentally addicting, there is an addiction issue in some people with it. One of the best testimonies I heard since I've been, when I was actually on the Sober Home Committee, was from Louis Gomez, one of our residents right here in Prescott, and he was speaking about when he first tried marijuana, he could not wait to smoke another joint the next day, the next evening, what have you. So again, when I come back to the question, if it affects some people like that, is it really worth legalizing it overall where we can just go to the store like a liquor store and buy marijuana, and it becomes more prevalent in our, I mean, let's face it, it's everywhere now. We talk about the kids buying it. They can buy it they can buy it now.
Oh, yeah.
Education's the most important part. You know, when I was sitting on the Sober Home Committee, Sally, I was shocked to hear that a hit of heroin was easier and cheaper than to get a beer for an 18-year-old. It was like $5 a hit. Yeah. And I'm like, something's wrong something's very wrong. And so it's available to our kids. We've got to teach them. We've got to speak to them and let them know that this is a dead end. I'll never forget, I'm a child of the 60s as well, but the old commercials of Dragnet, Sergeant Friday. Don't let your life go up in smoke. And that's what hit me when I was a young person. Don't let your life go up in smoke.
Yeah, and I lost my son, and his suicide note read, in part, my soul is already dead. Marijuana killed my soul, plus ruined my brain. And it still hurts. It's grieving is a long, long process. I've learned to live with it.
We never get over it.
We never get it. It always hurts, but it's important to us to keep our kids with us and in our lives. I do not let Andy go. I put on his dog tags, and I put on this beautiful necklace my daughter gave me that has Andy's thumbprint on it. And I did it today. Come on, Andy, we're going to work.
Yeah.
We're going to go share your message. Because I call it helping Andy help others. And we need to keep talking about it, because I live today with this thought every day. Is like, oh my gosh, if I had only known this, if I had only had current information about drug use and what was going on. I was just remembered this morning an old memory when Andy was a freshman in high school. And he and I lived in an apartment for a short period of time in between two houses, a house sale and a house purchase. And he told me, you know, Mom, there's a guy that lives upstairs from us that's from California, and he's a medical marijuana card holder, and he has medical marijuana, and he can share that with all of us kids. And I realize now, I think he probably had my son selling it for him. Maybe, I don't know. But these are the things I live with today that, I wish I'd known. I wish I could do things differently. So I feel very, very compelled to do what we're doing today and keep talking about this.
Well, we have to bring it out into at least have the conversation.
We do.
And I know hindsight's always 20/20, and shoulda, coulda, woulda. When I speak to Doug Dolan, and I mean, Doug is like, he's a volume of information, a recovery in the pines. And I listen to him and I think, man, I wish I would have known Doug Dolan 7 years ago, because he might have made a difference. I don't know, God takes people when they're ready to go, when he wants them. But, I think Doug Dolan might have made a difference in our lives and saved a lot of grieving. And like you said, the grieving never stops. We get through it, and we're here to talk about it. But this is why I was so compelled to have you on the show and have you come in and speak about 207, because it's impacted both of our lives, and we just want to get out to the people for your consideration. We're not trying to preach to you, but this is what 207 is. The dangers of marijuana are one thing, but then the dangers of the actual proposition are another. And that's why, Sally, if you could take it from there and talk about the
I'll talk about that a little bit. I want to have viewers pay attention to what I consider my voter's Bible. Everybody receives this in the mail, and I hope everybody opens it up and reads it. And it's so long, you're not going to read all of it. I haven't read all of it. You try to read a proposition, and the pages and pages and pages of legal language is really, really difficult. But if I could point to a couple of things that I think are extremely important. The pages of arguments for and against propositions are so full of good information, and they're written from people like us to people like us. They're easy to understand, and it's such important information. I was poised and ready with my comment that I wanted to get in there, and I was watching on the computer every day to see when they opened the portal for me to submit it, and apparently I hit it right on the moment because mine's the first one. So I don't remember what page that is, but on the first page of arguments against page Prop 207. But I also want to point out Glenn's wife has an argument in there too against Prop 207, Jill Martin. Matt Force has some in there. Matt Force, our organization to help prevent substance abuse in our county. But near the end are two women who are very, very dear to me. They both live in Flagstaff, and they wrote an argument against 207 together. Their young mothers and their young sons took their life by suicide. They were, it's like my sons, they were using marijuana heavily at the time. And, you know, the death certificates don't say the cause of death is marijuana. They don't. They can't. They say the cause of death is suicide. But we know the truth. We know what our children were using. I know what my son said in his suicide note. Marijuana killed his soul plus ruined his brain. But I encourage people, use your publicity pamphlet and look toward the very end of the arguments against 207 for the two mothers in Flagstaff that shared about their sons. What they've become dear friends of mine, and one son is named Andy, like my son Andy. So when we talk, I go, my Andy or your Andy, our Andys.
Right.
We're helping our Andys help
Right.
others by talking out. So that's one of the important parts of this booklet, I think, is, you look at the arguments. Who argues for Prop 207? I think there are 9 arguments in there, and there are over 100 against it that are from doctors and preventionist people, pediatrician, a drug researcher, addiction psychiatrists, from people who see it and really know it and understand it. The arguments for are for the people that want to make money on it, or they want to be able to be impaired by the drug all day long, because that is today's kind of norm with this drug. Now that it can be used in vapes and edibles, many marijuana users want to do what I've heard it called wake and bake, first thing in the morning, and just keep it going all day long. I was in a smoke shop here in Prescott several years ago. I got a lot of my marijuana education right from their own mouths. I went into many dispensaries and smoke shops and just talked to them and asked them to teach me about marijuana. And I'll never forget one here in Prescott. There was a young guy in a shop that was just selling pipes. That's all they sold, as far as I could tell, was pipes. Now, maybe they sold marijuana in the back room. I'll never know, and he certainly wouldn't have told me that. But I asked him if he thought it was addictive, and he says, oh, no. He says, I could quit any time I want. But he says, I use it all day long, every day, because I don't ever want to not be stoned. But it's not addictive.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten that young man and thinking, that's his state of mind is impaired by the drug all day long. And what the impairment is it reduces several things. It enhances some things, but it reduces some very important things that are needed for driving, the experience of time measurement and how time goes by. There are some things. It is not an enhancement to a driver, and that's one of the problems with 207. Is what that would do is change the laws in a way to protect the all day long marijuana user. They've built that in there, and I mean, it is a problem with this drug that there isn't a good roadside test for marijuana impairment. There just isn't a good one. When the blood is tested, the high levels of THC go out of the blood very quickly. they go into the body and they adhere to the fat cells and they build up. So a regular marijuana user may have a lot of built up THC in their body, and they might not have just used in the hour before. Maybe they're okay to drive for a period of time, but we don't know. We just don't know. And one of the purposes of 207 is to protect those wake and bake and all day long users, to enable them to drive. As a driver on the roads myself, it scares me. But what scares me most is the kids that get in the cars with other impaired drivers. The kids that are in that brain development stage of, oh, I don't care about the risk. You know, the reward is too great. We've got to get to this party. We've got to do this. We've got to do that.
Well, we think about the risk of just you and I driving. How would you like to own a business? Like my friend Chris Kuknio, who owned Patriot Disposal. And here these guys are driving heavy machinery, you know, and I remember a lot of the warehousing people, they would have to take random drug tests. And of course, marijuana was part of that drug test. So those types of tests would no longer be legal if marijuana was legalized. Am I right there? Or?
No, I believe this rides a real fine line on that they can test, they just can't do anything about it. An employer can't. They may, you know, suspect that their employee is using. They may be able to do a test, but they can't fire them for them.
Gotcha.
Or I think that's what's in the nuance of this law, employers can still do that, and employers can say you cannot use on the job. You can't use it here in our facility. But if they suspect that they're coming to work under the influence every day, and then at lunch hour boosting it up again, if they suspect that, I don't think an employer can do anything about that anymore. They may, and it'll be tested in the courts as we go forward. That's what's happening in Colorado, I understand. So.
Well, it's interesting, like we were talking before the show with 207, to change anything, if we should learn something that is impacting our society, and we want to change it, we say, you know what, and it's a negative against 207. The legislature cannot touch this, any of the bill. It's like it's in the Constitution, it's there. Nobody can touch it. It has to go before another vote before the people. So if there's, I'm just making this up now. Brownies are bad. We shouldn't have brownies. If we said, the legislature just can't say, yeah, this is right. We're gonna nix them. It has to be voted on, and that's kind of. That's a pretty powerful way of legislating itself. We don't trust our legislature anymore. We only trust going through the voters again.
I'd like to point out a couple of things that I learned. Again, in this publicity pamphlet on page 75, it starts the analysis by legislative counsel. That is much, much easier for a person to read and understand than all the pages that preceded it.
What page is that on?
It's on page 75.
75.
Analysis by legislative counsel. And it lasts for approximately 2 pages. I listened online to the process in the legislature where they talked about this and approved it, how it was going to be written and appear here. And there was discussion about some of our legislators didn't want to include the last paragraph, and I guess I'm going to take our time here to read the whole last paragraph, and it's just kind of tacked on, so it's not. I'll bet most people don't see it. They don't read it. But what it says is Arizona Constitution limits the ability of the legislature to amend an approved initiative measure or to appropriate or divert monies created or allocated by an approved initiative measure. Any future legislative changes to the initiative measure may be made only if they are approved by at least 3/4 of the members of each house of the legislature, and the changes further the purpose of the initiative measure, or if they are approved by the voters through referendum or initiative. In other words, another initiative to replace this initiative. that is so important for voters to understand that when a voter votes yes on any proposition, they're making laws. They're making laws. I try to teach people that. It's like, if you're going to vote yes, you better put a lot of time into study, just like a legislator would be required to do in order to present a law and pass a law. And then, beyond that, and I think it's on the pages of the actual bill itself, the proposition, on page 75 again, just before, where I mentioned this legislative counsel statement starts. Up at the top, they put into this initiative Section 7, Voter Protection Act. So they addressed that. And they put in here 8 conditions under which this initiative can be advanced. So right there, they put into the law some restrictions on what the legislature could do, even if they could get that 3/4 vote.
Right.
In other words, we can't change this.
Right.
It's set
I think
in
that's the
stone.
bottom line. When it's in there, it's going to be in there.
Yeah. So, and you know what? Who put this proposition on our ballot?
Right.
There's largely 3 large marijuana companies, and the big marijuana, I call them, the people that are going to make the money on it. It's right there in the initiative of who gets to have the businesses, and it's the existing medical marijuana dispensaries are the first ones to be able to add recreational marijuana to there. You know, another thing in looking through this, I want to bring up, I looked at, there's also a budget committee fiscal analysis, and they put some numbers in there. And then in the 4 arguments, they put some numbers in there to how much money they think they're going to make on this. And I do have a little bit of a math mind. My degree was accounting, and my first career was a management accountant, and my second one was financial advisor. So I kind of like playing with the numbers. But I can't figure out what in the world they're projecting $3 billion of revenue over 10 years. Okay, that's $300 million per year of additional taxes. To reach that, I just think that's real wishful thinking and impossible thinking, because to reach that with the taxes, they'd have to sell so much more than they sell right now. I've also seen, I saw an opinion in the Arizona Republic, I think it was yesterday, it was somebody saying, oh, the poor medical marijuana card holder who can't afford the $150 a year it takes for the medical card. This way, they'll be able to not have to do that, and they can just buy recreational. With the recreational, the taxes are a 16% excise tax. That's on top of taxes we have now, which are roughly 9% in every city.
Right.
So 25% taxes. So if you're a medical marijuana card holder and you want to save that $150 fee, that means you don't have to pay taxes on your product.
Right.
You would have to buy just $600 a product to save that. I mean, you'd be paying that in taxes. So $600 in that product is not very much. I understand an ounce today is maybe in the neighborhood of $200 or so. 3 ounces, a medical marijuana card holder is more likely using the average from the program. If you look up the statistics, is about an ounce a month.
Right.
That's 12 ounces, not 3 ounces. The math just absolutely does not work. And even if they're somewhat right, it means they're saying that these medical marijuana card holders will become recreational purchasers instead. I don't think so. The medical marijuana program allows them to purchase up to 2.5 ounces at a time. The recreational limits it to 1 ounce. So I've even seen an ad in a newspaper in a hotel in Colorado that says, marijuana users, don't give up your medical card. Here's the math.
Yeah.
You know, it makes much more sense to pay that annual fee than to pay taxes on it. So when they project revenues, I just don't see how they could possibly happen or get anywhere close to that.
Fuzzy math.
Yeah, very fuzzy math. Yeah.
Well, I think that we've learned a lot of things from Colorado, and Colorado is like the Petri dish, if you will. I mean, they were the first to legalize. And that was always the sell for marijuana, if you will, was to tax it, be able to give it to the schools. But I think that we have learned from Colorado, again, the impact that it's been on our communities in services, fire, police, ERs, the accidents that have occurred on our streets due to usage of marijuana. Again, are we really wanting to open up that Pandora's box and go through that door? Because once we go through the door, Sally, it's not coming back.
We talked about that. That's no, the legislature can't fix it. They can't make things better, and we just have more and more users.
It's got to go to a vote, and that's never going to happen.
Yeah. You're probably familiar with Dr. Ed Gogek, Arizona addiction psychologist. I have been so enlightened by him about how this drug is so unlike other drugs that you don't find an opioid. I hate to use the word addict, it just sounds like a bad word, and I don't like to say a bad word, but an opioid user or a heroin user, cocaine user saying, come on, all my buddies, you've got to be users with me too. And come on, we've got to legalize this, and we've got to share this with everybody. We've got to share it with the world. It becomes a following. There's a following for this drug that's unlike others. I'm recently reading some books that are now out of print that were actually printed in the 80s. And they talk in there about that kind of almost religious following of the drug. And they had a kind of a theory that maybe it's because the marijuana, the chemicals themselves, THC in particular, are accumulating in fat cells. And they're just always there. They're always there and growing bigger and bigger to where the body just feels that that's life itself.
I think it's a culture.
Yes.
I think the marijuana culture is alive and well. And I will give you a perfect example. And back in the days in the police departments, you know, it's pretty easy to pick out somebody who is a stoner, you know. Even the way they don't laugh like normal, that ha, you know. I mean, we laugh at some of the comics now that do that, but it's, you could perceive it. And I saw that for the first time in many, many years. I went to, a few years back, we went to Durango, Colorado. And I hadn't been to Durango for many, many years. And I absolutely saw the drug culture on the street. I saw the little derby hats and all the little, you know, the guys with the derby hat braided, trying to sell, you know, whatever. And well, they weren't selling, but I mean, I could see the culture. Now, I don't mean to stereotype anybody. So if you're like, are you stereotyping? No, it's there. I see it. And I guess I'm sensitive to it because I saw it back in the 60s, 70s. And though I've not been around that type of stuff for a long, long time, when I went back and saw it, it was very obvious to me. So, you know, it is what it is. I'm not trying to, again, I'm not trying to stereotype a group of people, but I certainly see it when and I recognize it.
It's that cool culture that's part of the attraction to kids, for sure. And the big marijuana, the businesses that are here selling it now and want to sell more, that's what 207 is about, is all, I mean, look at the revenues they're projecting.
Right.
They're projecting huge growth.
We'll never get that money back, Sally. And you know what's worse? We'll never get our kids back.
Exactly.
We'll never get our kids back. We'll never get the impact that it has on our society. We'll never get that back. I don't care how much damn money you make. I don't want to get going here. No. I can get going really well.
But for them to have a viable and sustainable business, they need customers. They need customers in the future, and those are our kids.
And they are our kids.
Yeah.
And I see things on the internet about, there's groups even here in Prescott, you know, who try to teach our kids the safe amounts of marijuana to smoke. And I just go, oh my gosh, you know who I'm talking about, and you know the groups that I've talked about, and they would actually meet at the Prescott Library and speak about, you know, the safe usage of marijuana. And I would just cringe because everything that we're trying to do with MatForce and teach these kids, you know, they are just like the very opposite side. And, you know, it's painful to watch. It's painful for me to watch, and people who, like you and I, are in that special club, that we've seen the damage done. And we've seen the damage done in families and on our streets. And we've both seen it. Let me ask you this, Sally. A couple of years ago, and this is the last time I think you were on with me, it was no on 205.
Yeah,
And
4 years ago.
205,
Yeah.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the difference between 205 and 207? Is there any difference, or I don't know?
There are some subtle differences. I know the yes on 207, people say they fixed all the things we complained about in 2016. And one of the little fixes that they have, I know, is that they put a little bit of a limit on the candies that can be sold. They say right in the initiative that they can't be gummy bears and they can't look like today's toys, children's toys and things. So they put a little limit on that. They did some little things to make it a little bit better.
How many ER visits in Colorado from gummy bears and edibles from kids that got into it? Had no idea.
They report,
even here, I've read it in Arizona where they bring the stuff back from Colorado and somebody forgets it's laying out or what have you. I know a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't be be more responsible as a parent. Well, when you're stoned, that's hard to be responsible. It goes into that fog. So, the dangers are there.
I consult a little bit with some of the people in Colorado in an organization called Smart Colorado. And they put out a lot of good drug education, marijuana education information, and they meet with the legislators there, and they try to work toward improving the safety, the public safety in Colorado as it relates to marijuana. And one of their big concerns is the potency. The potency is so high that it just takes a little tiny bit to cause extreme danger. And the marijuana industry in Colorado has been very resistant to doing that, and they will be here too, and they did not add this into Prop 207, any limit on potency, just on quantities. But when the potency is so high in that quantity, it's dangerous. They're dangerous drugs.
Another thing I see, and again, I'm a pretty political guy, Sally, and I do see it's not supposed to be partisan. And I know there's Republicans out there that use, and I know there's Democrats out there that would definitely vote no on 207. I get that. But going to different events, I see there's a political divide on this issue. I go to the conservative events, and it's overwhelmingly no on 207. Now, quite honestly, I don't go to the Democratic ones. They won't allow me in the door. But I've talked to other Democrats who do absolutely think that 207 is a good idea. Do you see that as well, or is that just me?
Oh, I see that happening, and I know one of their talking points on that is the criminal justice one, and they claim that the jails are full of people, that we're misusing our jail system to put in people for simple drug possession. And that's what they claim, but that's some wishful thinking that people will believe what they're saying, because I think the number of people in jails in Arizona for simple possession is 102. That's not filling up our jails. Now, I looked recently at federal, because in the House of Representatives, they've been, the Democratic Party is, I shouldn't say the party, but all the sponsors and co-sponsors of this bill are all Democrats. Something called the MORE Act, M-O-R-E. And part of that is to get the people out of federal prisons that are there just for simple possession. So I did some research on that to say, well, I wonder how many there are. Well, there are 235. It's minute. It's like 1% of the prison population. So I know in listening to some of the Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, they're saying, we have to get these people out of jail. Well, what people? They're not filling up our jails. We don't free up our law enforcement resources just by, take care of those people with a simple possession. So
I think it's out there on the street that in Arizona, if you are arrested for having marijuana in possession of, unless it's a big quantity, and I don't know what the quantity is. You know, while I'm thinking about it, because my memory's short, if Sheila Polk is watching this, please, Sheila, I'm begging you, come into my show. Let's talk about 207. Let's talk about the legal parts of it. Even if I have to come to your office, I'm willing to. I'll buy my camera guy a breakfast or a Big Mac or whatever to get over there. But he's looking up at me.
I second that.
I will do whatever I can to get Sheila Polk and talk about this, because I think she's the best spokesperson.
Oh,
I'm not dissing
absolutely.
you at all.
No, she's.
But and me too. But I mean, she's the person that can really break this thing down for us. And you know, Sally, I wanted to get a no 207 sign. And I talked to some of my friends, well, you know, the Kandars. And, you know, the bottom line is there are no 207 signs because we don't have any money.
They're coming, but it sure has been slow.
Because we don't have you know, big marijuana's pushing a bunch of money into this, you guys. And, you know, this is coming from a grassroots operation. So another reason why I want to utilize my venue to get our side out there, you know, because you're sure as heck going to hear the yes on 207 sides very loudly. So anyway, I'd like to get Sheila Polk in. It would be a great time to get the word out and get the message out to the voters. You know, I'm not really so worried about our Yavapai County, because I see a lot of
You're right.
no on 207 here. Maricopa,
I'm worried.
whole different story. Yuma,
yeah.
whole nother story. So
yeah.
hopefully the folks who are watching this show have friends in Maricopa or Yuma. Maybe they can share that with them. And, you know, again, at least get our side of the story out there.
Yes. Yeah.
And our story, bottom line. But anyway, Sally, go ahead.
Yeah, so I ask voters, use your voter Bible. I love this book. It teaches you so much and tells you so much. And, you know, if you've already voted by mail, so be it. But if you haven't, and you're talking with someone else who's about to vote and they really don't know much about 207, there's a lot of good literature for the asking of, you know, find information about 207 and realize that yes votes put into place an impossible to change laws in Arizona that harm Arizona kids. They put everybody in more danger on the road. They have negative impacts on Arizona's economy. They tie the hands of employers in some ways, and they lock Arizona into the bad policy.
Well, thank you, Sally. I appreciate you coming in. And again, I know early voting has already started by the time this gets aired. So if you haven't voted and you want to learn more, are there any websites or Facebook sites that the audience can go to?
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy, did I open a door. Another Pandora's box.
I'm asked that question all the time, so I prepared this to give to people. These are my lists of my resources, but in particular, I'd direct people to Matt Force. Matt Force has a tremendous amount of good information. Marijuana Harmless, Think Again, .org. There's a national organization called Smart Approaches to Marijuana, and that's learnaboutsam.org. And there's a new one that's so important to me called Johnny's Ambassadors. I don't think I brought anything, but Johnny was a suicide last November in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado area. His mother is a national speaker, and she's very smart, and she's very driven to share with people the fact that her son Johnny was dabbing marijuana, 19 years old. He took his life because he thought the FBI was after him. He was in full psychosis, and so she has created an organization, johnnysambassadors.org, and she has a series of webinars, free webinars on every Friday with doctors, addiction specialists, all kinds of people that are just incredible. They are so good. They're all free, johnnysambassadors.org. Parents Opposed Pot is one I've been involved in for a long, long time on Mom's Strong.
Yeah, Mom's Strong, yeah.
Joey's story is on momstrong.org. A lot of stories like ours.
Well, you know, Sally, again, I thank you for coming in. And one of the things, and question that I would get quite frequently on the committee, and knowing that I lost my son. One, talk to our kids, if I can get your picture real quick. Talk to our kids, get them involved in little groups. Matt Force is out there. They'll talk with you and have that conversation with your kids. And the biggest thing, another thing is, don't let those drugs stay in your medicine cabinet. Lock them up.
Oh, yeah.
Because unfortunately, we don't think about this, just like you were saying in your testimony. We never think it could happen to our kid.
Yeah.
We were middle class, baseball player, football player, did a lot of skateboarding, went to the beach, and tragedy hits us. It doesn't matter who you are, police, fire, lawyers, doctors. This affects many, many families in our communities. So again, reach out to Matt Force. They will help you. There's other organizations that will help you as well, and we'll put up your sheet on our screen so people can get that.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Sally, and
Yeah.
we'll keep on giving it the good fight.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Folks,
Glenn.
thank you again for watching. I always close the show out with thanking our current and prior serving military for giving us the freedom that we can sit at the table and speak to these issues. We also want to say,
My son was a paratrooper with 82nd Airborne, very proud of his service.
yeah, very much so. Thank you for our law enforcement and our fire department for keeping our streets safe. Thank you to our PANT officers out there. You guys do an awesome job. We thank you. Keeping the poison off the streets that goes into the veins of our young people. So with that, Sally, we'll see you next time, and we'll keep on pushing.
Yep.
Have a
Yep.
good day, Prescott.
Yep.
Thank you.